this video is obviously coming off the heels of this Monster and Men video. I'm predominantly going to be focusing on the female monsters. Female dragons, the Succubus, Medusa, Gorgons, the Sphinx, okay? Because all these things are in the Bible and they come from the ancient world. And I'm really going to be focusing on Medusa and how it relates to the Bible. And I'm going to compare Medusa to Lot's wife, because scholars have been wondering about that for a long time. I'm going to give you the parallelism between Lot's wife turning into stone and Medusa turning into stone, and how these stories actually influenced how women are portrayed on TV. Okay, these ancient stories laid a mold for how women are portrayed on TV. And I'll be talking about that. And I'm going to be talking about Gorgons and a bunch of other stuff. So probably one of, if not the very first version of a female monster is Tiamat. Tiamat is a woman, but she's a dragon, okay? And in the story of Tiamat, which goes back almost to the beginning of time, it's a story about a dragon who's a woman, and she gives birth to she gives birth to all the humans, and she gives birth to demons too, though, okay? And what happens is she starts off good, but what happens is she becomes evil, and she tries to kill all the humans and kill her babies. She tries to eat her young. And so her grandson or her son has to go and kill her, okay? Because he has to put her down because she went crazy and started killing everybody. That's the story of Marduk and Tiamat. And that is very obvious, okay? The Bible has a constant theme about an evil mother, and it's either a woman riding on dragons, right? And God is constantly trying to tell you to come out of her. Come out of this evil mother, right? That's obviously a reference to Tiamat. Okay, and the next monster I want to talk about from the ancient world that you see on TV today are Succubus, okay? Succubus come from the ancient world, and they're definitely in the Bible, okay? I already gone over the Succubus in this video right here, this Lilith. Okay, Lilith was something... It's so funny because Lilith and Tiamat are together. These characters just intertwined and became a bunch of different characters. Today, until today. Which is going to be my point in a minute. But, so Lilith was a owl-type goddess. And she would seduce men, and she would give them sleep paralysis and all this stuff. I already talked about that in this video. I talked about Lilith. This screech owl in the Bible... When it talks about the screech owl, it's talking about Lilith. And no joke, it's probably talking about Gorgons as well, which I'll get into in just a second. So Lilith is in the Bible, and I will bring up some characters in the Bible and in real life where these are pointed out. The Phoenix is definitely in the Bible. It's not always female though, okay? And it's actually, all this stuff is actually where that stuff comes from. It comes from the Bible anyway. The phoenix, if you don't know what the phoenix is, it's a mythological bird whose nest used to be in the ashes. Its nest used to be in the ashes, but it rose above the ashes, and its new nest is in the sun, where it lives forever. Okay? It has two nests. Its nest is either in the ashes, and it can either rise above the ashes and make its nest in the sun, where it can live forever, or its nest is always going to be in the ashes, and it's going to die. Okay? It's about someone who conquered death, right? And that's an obvious reference to Jesus, okay? But let's get into this a little bit deeper. So it's very important that the word sand is the same Hebrew word used for the word phoenix, okay? So when I mention sand, it can be translated as sand or phoenix. So let's read this, and some translations just say phoenix, okay? So let's read this passage in the book of Job. Then I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. And something that's very interesting is that Job was literally sitting in a nest of ashes while he was saying this. His ashes were his nest at the time. He was literally sitting in ashes, okay? And then some translations will say, multiply my days as the phoenix, because phoenix lives forever. And this is actually really important. The word thousand has the word sand in it. So whenever you read the Bible or you see the word thousand, it's making a forever phoenix reference. Do you get what I'm saying? The word thousand has the phoenix in there. It means regeneration and lives forever. But there is a couple of references of this phoenix referred to as a woman, okay? In the book of Revelation, and there's other Bible passages that refers to a woman given wings to be lifted up out of the sand, out of the dirt, out of the ashes, okay? God lifts a woman up out of the ashes, all right? Okay, now, most people know what a phoenix is, or what a dragon is, or a succubus is, but something that people are not aware of or not as familiar with are Gorgons. Even though I will show you right now, they're all over the place. Medusa was a Gorgon, so in order to get to the Medusa stuff, I have to explain what a Gorgon is, and then I have to explain what all this hair stuff is. Okay, so I'm gonna get into the meat of the video, the Medusa, but first I have to explain what a Gorgon is. A Gorgon originally started out as a demon in the ancient Near East. That's probably the first mention or instance of an imagery of a Gorgon. Even in the ancient Near East, it said this thing was a demon. But half the time, these things got turned into gods in other religions. In China, they got turned into heroes and gods. In the Hindu religion, they got turned into Hindus and gods. Okay, and not to mention, it's where clowns come from. Clowns come from Gorgons. All right. Gorgons have really big, crazy eyes, and they have their tongues hanging out, and they usually have very weird hair. And they have a really big, neurotic face to them. They have really big mouth, okay? And another thing is that they contort their bodies in weird ways. Their bodies are all bent and weird and shape and weird, all right? And I really need to repeat some of this because I'm going to really have to show you how all of this is in movies. They bend their body around, and they roll around, and they crawl all over things, okay? They crawl up trees and they roll around your roof. Okay, I'm not kidding. And this is where gargoyles come from. Gorgons are where gargoyles come from. And even in real life, you can see the gargoyles are usually in corners. Okay, they're depicted as climbing up poles. Okay, so I'm gonna get you guys to connect some dots. So this is a Gorgon. Okay, this is a Gorgon. It's got a big smile. It's got very crazy eyes, which I'll get into in a minute, and they crawl all over things and they hide out in corners. That's what this is, okay? This is Gorgon. This is a Gorgon demon, okay? Okay, and what did I just say? I said Gorgons are the Hindu gods, and you're doing the bent twisted dance of the Gorgon when you do yoga, okay? You're literally doing a demonic thing in yoga. You're doing a Gorgon dance, alright? Okay, and another thing I'm going to have to bring up is that these gargoyles, these Gorgons, are mostly all over older Catholic churches. Okay? This church is literally crawling with demons that they say is there to protect them. Because back then they said that's what these things were for too. Well, it's protecting us. No. But what happened is over time they just started making them more pretty. Okay? Gorgons are demons. But Gorgon became the word gorgeous, okay? These are gorgeous Gorgons. They're still evil. They look nice. These saints or whatever these statues are in front of Catholic churches, they're still Gorgons. They're gorgeous Gorgons. They're still evil. They're not here to protect you. Do not go to a church that has a bunch of statues saying that they're there to protect you. It's a trick. They're demons, okay? These Catholic churches are literally crawling around with this. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the hair real fast. So Gorgons have very weird, crazy hair, and people don't really know why. Sometimes they're snakes, or they're wild and crazy, and it's going everywhere. And I have an explanation for that. Okay, so in the ancient world, and sometimes in real life, some cultures still believe this. They believe they got special powers from the hair. Okay, your hair gave you special powers. It either made you really, the Native Americans thought, for example, if you had long hair, it made you really good at hunting. Okay. Lots of ancient cultures and in the Bible, hair was an extension to a god, a power from a god. It was more of like an antennas, okay, if it helps, and they were like antennas, and it gave you a sixth sense, or it gave you special powers, and that's in the Bible. God's special powers to him through his long hair was making him very strong. See, all this stuff is in the Bible, okay? And this is portrayed in movies. If you ever see movies where their hair is supernaturally floating or looks like they're underwater, I know you know what I'm talking about. when it looks like their hair is like floating and stuff like that. That is it's supernatural hair power. Okay, it's a theory from the ancient world. Okay. Also, Gorgons have Glaukopis. It's where the word glaucoma comes from, by the way. But Glaukopis means your eyes flash or they swirl. Okay, they have magic eyes that flash and swirl. And this is very important. Gorgons are partially where vampires come from. It depends on which vampire movie you are watching. Because vampires have Glaukopis that make you hallucinate. They have swirling eyes in some of these movies, right? They make you hallucinate. And even vampires have Succubus in them. Because in the more recent vampire movies, of course, that you are supernaturally attracted to them, like Succubus, right? These things are all mixed together, okay? And and all of them have phoenix stuff in there too. They all regenerate and live forever. That's all. Do you understand what I mean? How all these characters are just all mixed together, and people just keep mixing them together, okay? So yeah, Gorgons have magic eyes that do magic things, and magic hair, okay, that do other magic things, and they have supernatural powers. But also, these are also all signs of someone being very angry or very mad, or maybe someone who's crazy, because having a bunch of messy crazy hair just means you're crazy and mad and psychotic, right? Okay, so that's what Gorgons are. Gorgons are all over the place. Before I get into the Medusa stuff, I'll just show you some other ones that are all over the place, other than just the Gargoyles. So yeah, these are all Gorgon imagery from TV. Alright, So now I'm going to talk about Medusa real fast, but I'm going to have you think about something else in a minute. Okay, so I get it. Oh, these are demons. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, okay. So Medusa is a Gorgon. Okay, she has the power to turn men into stone, and she's got hair for snakes. Okay, and also men can't look at her either. Okay, and so she's a bad guy, right? She was portrayed as a bad guy mostly. Okay, until later generations. Okay, and the story is Perseus goes and cuts off her head because she's a monster that deserves to have her head cut off, right? She's a horrible, she's a demon, and she's like some sort of, and people argue about what it means, the deeper meaning behind when it says she turns men to stone. Like, what does that mean? It might not just mean that she kills them, but she can transfix men, she can make them hallucinate. Okay, it can mean a lot. The people have debated about that for a long time. It means that she could hypnotize men, because that's what that swirling eyes mean. They means hypnotism. Okay, so maybe she has the power to control men, and she has the power to kill men, and men can't look at her. And okay, and that's all linked in with succubus stuff too. Okay, like these are evil women, correct? That's true. Like women who control men and subdue them and is evil, correct? Okay. Or they use their sexuality to control men as well. It's all symbolism, sure. Yes, and that is in the Bible, right? In the Bible, Samson cannot look at Delilah anymore. So that's why he had his eyes taken out, okay? Because once you look, you're going to have to touch, right? So Delilah is still like a hypnotism, succubus type situation. It still has a little bit of Medusa stuff in there, because Medusa can't have men look at her. And that's what happens to Samson. He can't look at Delilah because she controls him, right? Until his eyes were taken out. And when he could no longer look at her, that's when he was released from under her spell. You get it? And also something else I wanted to point out is that, this cutting off of the head or cutting of the hair, because hair also meant fertility. Okay, there is some castration metaphors here. Okay, when Delilah cuts off Samson's hair, it might mean something else. Okay, or when Medusa had her head cut off, that is possibly, lots of scholars say this, it's a castration metaphor. All right. Okay, so Medusa's just some demon who deserves to have her head cut off, and she's evil. But this is what happened with Medusa, and it's very important, because this video is going to start taking a turn, okay? Now we're going to do the other side of Medusa, and how that relates to the Bible. Okay, and we're gonna really get into this. So for a long time, Medusa was just some evil woman who needed her head cut off, until people started realizing how she got that way. Okay, now this is how Medusa became Medusa. She used to be, what did I say in this video, in that video, Monsters of Men video? I said usually all these monsters, like the vampires and werewolves, and they all have used to be human once, but something happened to them and they became a monster. Okay, so the story of Medusa is that she was a god art her. Okay, he forced himself on her all night long. Okay, and then what happened is another woman god cursed her. Okay, and that's how she became Medusa. Okay, and there's all this poetry on Medusa. Even Freud talks about Medusa, because this laid the foundations of storytelling about women. Okay, because before it was just usually about a man who just kills an evil woman, or a woman needs help from a man. But this is what this story of Medusa to really change everything. Okay, it's one of the great pinnacles in history, where people started looking at monsters at not just as evil things, as some mindless beasts. It gave monsters or evil things a face. Okay, because it took a while for them to realize that was messed up. It took a couple hundred years for people to realize that was messed up. Because so in the story of Medusa, she was just a normal, beautiful woman. She had very long, beautiful hair. She was very holy, and she went into a palace. Okay, and what happened is Poseidon forced himself on her, and then what happens is she got pregnant, and they kicked her out. Poseidon and Athena kicked her out and sent her off to an island. And people started realizing that was messed up. Because when that story was being written, I'm sure that was completely acceptable. Okay? It was completely acceptable for a man to force himself on a lady, especially if it was a man who had lots of power. Okay? And you can see where this is going. Okay? So, and they have all these poems about Medusa, and they're actually very sad, and I get it, okay? So, there's all these poems that, she started scratching her face, and you don't know and she was bloody and bruised, and you don't know if Poseidon did it, or if she was doing it to herself, okay? And she started out as a beautiful maiden, and then she transforms, she starts tearing off all her clothes and ripping her skin apart, and she becomes the Medusa, okay? And this is something you are going to see in movies over and over and over again. A woman goes through some tragedy, okay? Even if it's that kind, that very disturbing kind. And she transforms to become the Medusa. And Medusa is this powerful woman who controls men or kills them, right? And she is consumed with power. And she's all by herself, and she's consumed with power. Okay? And then later, what happens is, in these later stories of Medusa, and these more sad stories, because people started realizing over time that was messed up, Perseus goes, and what he does is he puts her out of her misery. Okay? Because she's screaming and crying alone in her castle, and Perseus has to take her and put her out of her misery because she's in agony, okay? And then that's when things got very interesting when it came to storytelling with women, okay? And it really became a story, and this story is older even before Romeo and Juliet and any of that stuff. That's when these Greek tragedies really started coming into play, okay? And, and Medusa didn't just become some story about some demon. It became a very sad, tragic story about a woman who was ravaged by a man, okay, and she got pregnant, and she becomes consumed with power and rage, and she went on a killing spree, and she became vengeful, and she lost control of it. And even in these some of these stories of Perseus, he has her go look in the mirror, okay? He can't look at her And yeah, the only way he can look at her is if he sees her reflection in the mirror, or his shield anyway. So in one of these stories, he sneaks up behind her, and she looks back and sees her reflection. Okay, and there's like maybe this metaphor of like, look what you've become. You know what I mean? Look, Medusa, get a hold of yourself. Look what you've become before it's too late. And yeah, and I get it. Yep, that is a very sad story. And he ends up usually cutting off her head, or she asks him to cut off her head because she can't control it anymore, right? And you can obviously see that in some of these movies. This whole situation is in every movie today, okay? Because that's where that situation comes from. But in real life, that happens too, right? Okay? And you know, I'm gonna just use some characters on TV. I don't watch current TV that often. These movies and characters are kind of dated, but they still apply. Most people should know what these characters are. Okay, so I'm gonna do Catwoman. I'm gonna do the Phoenix from X-Men, and Daenerys, obviously from the Game of Thrones as well, because these are like archetypical Medusa sad stories, are exactly the same as these stories back then. So let me show you this Gorgon picture of Medusa. She literally looks kind of like a cat, and I don't think that's by coincidence either. They were using cats and snakes probably because snakes represent regeneration. Reptiles represent regeneration, right? Because they can lose body parts and they'll grow them back. You know, like lizard lose their tail, right? But also, they might have been using cats on purpose as well, along with the snakes, because this is when they started having that theory that cats have 9 lives, right? They live forever or for a long time and they regenerate. That's still Phoenix metaphors, right? And on top of that, cats have magical hair, quote unquote. On their whiskers are extrasensory powerful hair, okay? Get it? Something that is also very interesting is if you look far away, she looks very nice. She looks like Hello Kitty or something, but when you pan in, she's got big old fangs, right? It's like a cat. And not to mention, this cat business in these movies is still Gorgon imagery. So first of all, Catwoman is a Gorgon, okay? She has the big crazy eyes and that big old smile, right? And you can even see it, right? And what happens to Catwoman? She starts off as some beautiful, nice, calm lady, just like Medusa, same exact story. Coincidence? No. It's not a coincidence. And then something happens. A man pushes her out of the window, right? And then she goes through a transformation. She goes home. She's bloody and bruised. And I get it. It's supposed to be very sad, and I get it. Yeah, okay. And she starts tearing apart her apartment. She goes through a transformation. And when she's done with the transformation, she becomes the Catwoman. Alright? She becomes Catwoman. It's the exact same story plot. It's not a coincidence. And then what happens to Catwoman? She goes on a killing spree of revenge and madness and power, right? And it's very sad. I get it. I get the sad ending stuff. I get it. I'll get to that in a minute. So, Batman goes to Catwoman just like Perseus goes to Medusa in these later versions, and he tries to calm her down. He tries to save her. He tries to get her to run away with him instead of doing this. Like, look in the mirror, look what you've become, right? And she's like, no, I can't. It's very sad. It's supposed to be very sad. She says, no, I can't. She can't do it. She can't let go of her anger and her vengefulness, right? It's the exact same story of Medusa. Exact same. And same thing happens with the Phoenix, okay? I can only use old movie references because I don't really watch movies anymore, not current ones. So, you know, she starts off as a nice superhero and then she turns evil and she literally starts turning people into ashes and stone. And then she starts blowing people away and she becomes evil. And Wolverine tries to come and save her, tries to show her that she's being crazy and she's killing everybody and she's got to stop. And then she asks him to put her out of her misery, and he ends up killing her. And it's supposed to be very, very sad, and I get it, okay? Alright, I get it. But I really, so yeah, I could easily just say this just comes from the Medusa stuff, which it does. It comes from the story of Medusa. But all of these things are in the Bible, though. And that was way before Medusa was even written. And you might wonder where this woman who had to die comes from. And people have wondered if what's the connection between Medusa and Lot's wife. I will tell you, Lot's wife has the exact same story. First, because in one of the versions of Medusa, she turns around and she looks in the mirror and turns into stone, and then she gets her head cut off. That's one version, and that's the same thing that happened to Lot's wife. She looked back, and she got turned into stone. She got turned into a pillar of salt. And that's not just me making that weird connection. Scholars have been wondering of what's the connection. Okay, I will tell you right now, but we're going to have to read some Bible verses. Alright, so let's look at this. Okay, it tells you a lot of stuff, but you have to read between the lines, and you have to really understand what's going on in these stories, okay? So, first of all, you have to realize where Lot met his wife. Lot met his wife while he was being in captivity with the Sodomites. So, if you don't know what happened, Lot goes by himself he moves to the Dead Sea, which is where the area of Sodom and Gomorrah is. He gets kidnapped by the Sodom and Gomorrah people, okay? But Abraham comes and gets him free. But when he gets free, women are released with him. They must have made some deal with the Sodomites that they had to release Lot and the women. And I'm guessing that's where he met his wife. He met his wife. His wife were one of these women. His wife was in captivity in the Sodom and Gomorrah kingdom. Now, I really want you to think about something, okay? So everyone knows what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, some very bad stuff. They were doing the R word. That's all in the Bible, right? They're doing the R word. So I want you to really want to think about a woman in captivity with the Sodomites. You can imagine what happened to her when she was imprisoned with Lot with the Sodomites. You get what I'm saying? And then Abraham made some sort of deal to release Lot and the women. And that's where Lot met his wife. He met her with one of those women that were released out of the prisoners, okay? So now you're starting to paint a picture of what happened to Lot's wife. You get what I'm saying? So, I'll read it to you so you know I'm not lying. So, Lot went in by himself, and women came out with him. And he brought also back all the goods, and also with him, again, his brother, Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So it wasn't just Lot imprisoned, it was all those women, too, who came out with him. And it's even more disturbing because if you keep reading it, the Sodomites, these Sodomite leaders, they came out and tried to get the women back. They tried to make a deal with Abraham and Lot to get the women back. If you read it, they wanted the women back. They were going to pay them to get the women back. But luckily, Abraham said, no, we're going to keep the women, you keep the money, right? Okay, so now you're painting a picture of what happened to Lot's wife. And if that's not enough to convince you about what possibly could have happened to her, I'll even tell you what her name means. So the Bible doesn't say what her name is, but according to other Jewish sources, to other translations, her name was Ado. And guess what Ado means? It means some very bad things, and it means to be trafficked. Sexually trafficked. So yeah, so now you understand what's going on with Lot's wife and why she was so angry. Alright? And then what happens, okay? God decides to just burst the city into flames because he's done with this place, which I understand because this place was disgusting. Okay, there was lots of R word going on there and nasty stuff. And God's like, I'm going to destroy the city. But the angel and God warns them. He was probably specifically talking to Lot's wife. Okay, he warns him not to look back. But she eventually does anyway. She ends up looking back. And there's so much going on here. And people wonder why God didn't ask them not to look back. First of all, God was asking her to let go of it. Okay? To let go of this anger and this rage. And not to look back. To let it go. Right? But she looks back anyway. And people always wonder why she looked back. It wasn't because she wanted to go back. Or she missed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was because she wanted to watch it burn. Do you get what I'm saying? She wanted to watch the whole place burn because she was angry. She was vengeful. She was a little bit vengeful, and she couldn't let it go. God asked him to let it go. He'll take care of it, but she couldn't. She just couldn't let it go. Okay, she was, and it's a sad story, and it isn't funny. Okay, it isn't funny. You have to let it go. If something bad happened to you, if some monster did something to you, the last thing you need to do is become a monster yourself. Going on a murderous rampage is only going to get yourself into trouble. Okay, and I understand the justice. Okay, this is why it's so bad when people don't believe in God and the Bible, because the Bible does teach a judgment. Okay, there is a judgment coming for people who don't let go of their monsters. Okay, and he is going to have to put down people if they keep holding on to their monsters. There is a place for people who don't listen. Okay, this is why it's so dangerous for people not to believe in hell. Not only do the people think they can do whatever they want and never get busted, they think other people think there's no justice in the world, right? And so they take justice into their own hands because they don't. That's why it's so dangerous for you to not believe in hell. Okay, it's not just about bad people. It's about you taking justice into your own hands and then you becoming bad yourself. All right, and unfortunately, these movies. Okay, these guys are not heroes. Okay, Medusa is not a hero. Catwoman is not a hero. This X-Men people, they're not heroes, okay? They're not heroes. They're about revenge. Alright, and I understand where that comes from, but you gotta let it go and don't look back. Okay? If something like that happened to you, that's why people relate to these characters, even though they're just imaginary characters. People relate to them because of their own tragedy. And instead of letting go of that tragedy, you feel vengeful. You don't let it go and you can't stop looking back. Right? And that's the connection between Medusa and Lot's wife. Because all that stuff comes from the Bible anyway. The whole Lot's wife thing came way before the Medusa thing. You have to be like Job. The exact same thing happened to Job. He started off as a nice young guy and he was cursed. He literally looked like a monster. I know he didn't literally turn into a monster. He got boils all over his face. His whole family died. He lost everything. And he was just down in the dumps. But he made it through it. He was a true phoenix. Okay? He was the true definition of a phoenix. He rose from the ashes. These stories about these women going on murderous rampages is a fake phoenix. It's a fake, oh, I rose above the ashes. You didn't rise above the ashes, girl. You're going to be going to some place where you have to pay for all that. Okay? You can't go on revenge. And I know in real life, most people aren't literally going around killing people, but they have that vengeful attitude, which is just as dangerous. And I already know what some people are going to say. They're going to say the Bible does promote revenge. It promotes eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. First of all, I already made a video on this. This is not about revenge. This is repairing what you broke. It's about fixing the damages you've caused. It's not about revenge. This guy who comes and kills a woman, okay, that's not a hero. Okay, Jesus did that. He's the one who actually slayed these beasts, and he's the one that actually saved a woman. He saved Mary Magdalene. He didn't have to cut off her head. He got rid of her serpents. He cut off the serpents' heads. He actually puts people out of their misery, but not in some way where you have to die. Okay, that's a real hero, not some guy who cuts off your head and puts you out of your misery. That's not a good. That's like false heroism. Okay, and you offing yourself for revenge is false heroism too. Okay, I know you see these stories and like these people who off themselves, or they end up offing another person because they're in torment, isn't romantic. It's sad and it's not okay. And it's really sad because you can find salvation and you can find relief from your demons and your serpent's crown. And another thing is, it's really easy to demonize every single person. Some people get very angry with the world. They say it's all evil. But and Christians do this too, right? They demonize people who just need help. Sometimes it's really hard for people to see behind all this evil and see that there's a person there who needs help. That is definitely a message you can take from this. But it's also not okay to have sympathy for evil. There's an unbalance in the world, especially if you don't have the Holy Spirit. I understand you feel bad for these people who had bad things happen to them, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't vindicate what they do, okay? You have to separate, you have to try to help people, yes. You have to see that there's a person behind the mask of this torment, and you have to help them. But saying that they're vindicated and murdering everybody is not okay. That's a false balance. Okay, people don't have the Holy Spirit, so they feel bad for people who have bad things happen to them, but that doesn't mean it's okay for them to turn evil. Okay, that they're not vindicated in that. That's not you rising above the ashes, that's you becoming the ashes. It's a false salvation. It's false justification. So I want to point out a few more things in the video. So in the Greek culture, for that to happen to a woman inside a temple, they would have kicked her out of the kingdom. Okay, because the original story of Medusa is based on real things they would have done. And I'm going to say that because everyone loves the Greeks and the Romans so much. These people were terrible. Okay, they were right about some things, but they had an unbalance because they didn't have the Holy Spirit, and they were terrible. Kicking a pregnant woman out of the temple because that happened to her isn't her fault, and it's awful. And this is what God has to say about that. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But until the damsel, thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. Found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was no one to save her. So this is about a woman crying in the wilderness for that reason, and no one coming to save her. That's pretty crazy, because that's exactly what happened to Medusa. She got kicked out into the wilderness, and she was crying in her castle until someone came and cut her head off, but didn't save her. Anyway, so I think I'll end the video with Tamar. Tamar is a good example of a true phoenix rising from the ashes after that happened to her. Okay, bad stuff happened to her, and she didn't go on a murderous rampage. Okay, God took care of her, and she was fine, and she didn't go get revenge. That's how you really rise above it and don't look back. All right, a good story of what you're supposed to do. I'm sure if somebody made a movie about Tamar, people would not even watch it, especially the women, because the feminists. There is some truth in feminism, but when you're unbalanced not by the Holy Spirit, you are gonna be off balance, and you're gonna promote women going on revenge and killing sprees. You're gonna watch movies like this and be like, yeah, Tamar should have just gone crazy and killed everybody. She should have gone Kill Bill on everybody, but no, she didn't. Okay, and then she's the one that actually prospered and rose above the ashes, not these false heroes and this false heroism. All right, so please think about this stuff, guys, and thank you.